And hello.
Abhay. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Abhay, how are you?
I'm good. Namaste.
We are live now.
जयवीर मैंने ज्वाइन कर
Ma'am, we are live. We can start now.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good afternoon to everyone. I'm Dr. Neetu Bhagat. I'm Deputy Director at AICT, and it's my privilege to welcome you all to this panel discussion. This is the second panel discussion of the day, and the topic is Best Innovation and Startup Practices in Higher Educational Institution. And names of the esteemed panelists are Professor Abhay Karandikar. Professor Abhay Karandikar is Director IIT Kanpur. Professor A.B. Pandit, he is Vice Chancellor of ICT Mumbai. Shri Rahul Nair, he is Vice President in West India, and Dr. K. Radhakrishnan, ex-chairman ISRO. So it's a privilege to have such a esteemed panelist here. And with this, we'll start the panel discussion with the first speaker. The first speaker for this program is Professor Abhay Karandikar. He is currently the Director of Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. He spearheaded a national effort in setting up Telecom Standards Development Society of India. He has also been the member of Telecom Regulatory Authority of India and the chairman of the 5G Spectrum Policy Task Force. He serves on the board of several companies and has founded and mentored startups in telecom and networking. Professor Karandikar has several patents issued and registered, contributed to IEEE 3GPP standards, book chapters, many papers in international journals and conferences to his credit. With this, I request Professor Karandikar to share his vision and thoughts to the participants. Thank you very much. I welcome Karandikar sir to share his thoughts with the participants. So I think you are mute, sir. Please unmute yourself.
No. I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Yes,
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion on best practices in higher educational institutions. I will share some thoughts on what we have done in IIT Kanpur and what can be the model for successful incubation practices in higher educational institutions. First of all, I would like to mention here that in the recent years, there has been a significant interest in the universities and the institutions such as IITs to commercialize the research that is being done by the faculty and students in the research labs. And this has been facilitated not only through several programs of the Government of India, but also through several initiatives that the universities and the institutions themselves have taken in their organizations. Particularly in IIT Kanpur, we carried out a professionalization of incubator, where the incubator was registered as a Section 8 company to operate it more flexibly and independently, and that was the purpose. And we hired a professional CEO with several years of experience in the to provide an impetus to the incubating companies in terms of mentoring and initiating their enterprises. IIT Kanpur also has introduced a very flexible faculty entrepreneurship policy and student entrepreneurship policy, which enables the commercialization of the research which is being carried out by the faculty member with their research students. Currently, we have 100 plus incubating companies on the campus, and about 80 companies have already graduated. What has been the success stories and what has been our learnings? We have seen, and particularly, my own experience of not only heading IIT Kanpur, but my involvement earlier with the incubator of IIT Bombay. Both, IIT Bombay and IIT Kanpur, we have successfully exploited a large network of alumni who are helping and providing, their mentorships. In fact, a mentorship with a focused effort on bootstrapping the young entrepreneurs has really been a key to the success of many startups. The incubator also has been providing access to angel investors and the venture capital fund, and that has been done also very systematically, by the incubator. More recently, I will give you an example where a consortium of IIT Kanpur faculty member, students, very experienced industry professional, alumni, and the incubating companies not only developed, the mechanical invasive ventilator in a record 90 days period during the COVID pandemic, but also took it to the market and has now been deployed in more than 3,000 hospitals across the country. The story of this incubating companies actually demonstrate that the youth's talent, energy, and enthusiasm, when it is guided and channelized by experienced leaders, it can actually do wonders. In fact, this story has also demonstrated how academia can play the role of a catalyst in building, affordable state-of-the-art technology. And it has also shown how collaborations between the industry and academia can drive a very innovative and globally competitive product. So this was actually possible because as a part of this IIT Kanpur ventilator, we set up a very experienced task force, which not only comprised of the incubating company entrepreneurs, but also, a very experienced industry professionals. And the entire success of this story was helped by the speed of execution, the support that the government gave during the pandemic time, the participation of the faculty experts, and the focus on result and execution. And that is actually really are some of the key metrics for the successful execution of a incubating companies. Finally, I think there have been several Government of India programs which have been helping the incubators, both which are run by the Department of Science and Technology, Department of Biotechnology, Ministry of.
You are unmute.
Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, and some of these government schemes like Nidhi Prayas or Invest or the DSP schemes. Yes.
For about 30 seconds or a minute, because we have got disconnected. So it's not going live now. So we have dropped, the connection is dropped.
Okay.
Just hold on for a minute.
Okay. I think what I suggest is that we can restart the panel discussion, and I think Dr. Radhakrishnan can have the opening remarks, and then we can have the proper panel discussion.
That will be great. Just hold on.
Yeah, because I think, fine. I'm okay.
Abhay sir, Radhakrishnan sir, we are live now.
Yeah, you please request Dr. Neetu. She need not introduce. I will do that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Don't spend the time on those aspects.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. I
Yeah.
just wanted to introduce yourself, sir, if you
No,
permit me.
please don't
Okay, sir.
spend time on
Thank you,
it.
sir. Thank you, sir.
So, distinguished panelists, Professor Abhay Karandikar, Professor Aniruddha Pandit, Sri Rahul Nair, Sri Rajendra Ratnu. I'm extremely happy to join you today for this important session, which is a discussion on best innovation and startup practices in higher education institutions. We know that globally, India is somewhere in the median when it comes to innovation. And we have an advantage. The higher education institutions provide some of the best talent pools, the faculty, the postdoctoral researchers, and the research scholars. It is also said that mostly the prime motivation becomes impactful publications and professional accomplishments. But what we are also seeing today, the positive thing is many impactful problem solving innovations are coming up from these institutions. And today we have two success stories from two ecosystems. Professor Abhay Karandikar, Director of IIT Kanpur, is a renowned expert in mobile communications. And he is also a resource person for India's telecom policy bodies. And he has been spearheading a vibrant and impactful innovation foundation, a startup incubation, and student entrepreneurship at IIT Kanpur. From a state university of repute, we have an eminent chemical technologist, Professor Aniruddha Pandit. He is Vice Chancellor of the Institute of Chemical Technology, Mumbai. And what is more delightful here is they have a stated policy framework in place on innovation and startup to guide the faculty and students. So initially, I will request these two academicians to enlighten more about the institutional arrangements and the ecosystem to promote innovation and startups. Let us hear a few success stories and their impacts, lessons learned, and takeaways from both the successes and failures. And we have Sri Rahul Nair, who is specialized in public policy and technology policy. He heads government's Agni mission, which is an emerging technology program from the Office of Principal Scientific Advisor under the Prime Minister's Science, Technology, and Innovation Advisory Council. We also have Sri Rajendra Ratnu, an IAS officer with a proven track record of 2 decades. He is Joint Secretary in the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, and also India's Controller General of Patents, Designs, and Trademarks. I would request both of them to provide an overview of international best practices and lessons thereof, institutional synergy, policy interventions, and stimulus in vogue and those envisaged, as well as a vision of the nation and a way forward. So initially, I would request Professor Abhay to spend about 7 to 8 minutes and followed by the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for your opening remarks. And as you rightly mentioned that traditionally the higher educational institutions have been focusing more on publications in high impact journals. But we have seen recently in the last several years that there has been an emphasis on the translational research as well, where faculty members and students are keen to commercialize the research done in their labs, and also keen to see that the technologies and the research that they are doing ultimately have an impact on the society. So there has been an increasing trend now, more and more focus on translational research, apart from the fundamental and basic research that has been happening in the higher educational institutions. So this shift is very, very evident. And this translational research shift has been quite ably aided by setting up of incubators with the support from the Government of India's various programs in these institutions. So like, in other IITs, IIT Kanpur also set up the incubator. And in the recent years, we had professionalized the incubator by converting it into a Section 8 company and hiring a professional CEO. And one of the primary objectives of this exercise was so that we provide much needed flexibility to the incubator, which can actually then work with faculty members who are doing the translational research to convert their translational research or ideas or technologies into commercializable product. In the recent years, our board had approved the faculty entrepreneurship policy and the student entrepreneurship policy, which also has actually provided impetus and motivation to faculty members to commercialize their research. Now, in order to commercialize the research which is happening in the lab, there are, of course, several key ingredients that are needed. And our experience has shown that a combination of network of mentors, access to the angel investors and VC funds, and access to the market really play a critical role in the ultimate success of the commercialization. In IIT Kanpur, we have been very fortunate that there are a large number of alumni who have been themselves entrepreneurs in their profession, or they are corporate leaders or the industry leaders, and we have been fortunate to get their help to work as mentors for these enterprises. Some of these alumni have also provided the angel investment support and the VC support also. Now, I will just, while there have been many success stories, we have 100 plus incubating companies on the campus. I will just, in 2 minutes, briefly tell you the story of Nokark incubating companies, which is, there are certain lessons to be learned from that story. The Nokark incubating company actually during COVID-19 pandemic came out with a mechanical, invasive, and a very state-of-the-art ventilator, which is now deployed in more than 3,000 hospitals across the country. Now, why I'm saying is that this is not the story of just an incubating company developing a product or a faculty member's translational research taking it to the market, but this was all possible because we set up a consortium of IIT Kanpur faculty, very experienced industry leaders and medical professionals to help the incubating company. So basically an expert task force was set up, which actually helped and monitored the speed of execution with a focus on the results. And that actually led to the successful development of the technology. Of course, there was already a market during the COVID pandemic time, and that enabled and helped the company. And with the government supports and incubator participation, we could actually create a very world-class company. This story also showed that when the young entrepreneurs' talent, energy, and enthusiasm, when it is channelized by experienced leaders, it should be possible to do, and create globally competitive products. This also showed that how a very close coordinations between the industry and academia can also drive a very innovative and globally competitive product. So these were really two, lessons that we learned: a strong mentorship program, an availability of an expert task force, readily available market, and speed of execution and focus on results that actually led to the successful development of this.
Thank you,
Of course,
Professor Abhikaradika.
yes.
Last portion is the lesson that we have learned. That is, it was the need of the hour. There was a focus, there was synergy, there was a market available, government support, and also mentorship from the faculty who have technology as well as the industry who have the experience. Thank you. We will now go to
Thank you.
Professor
Thank you.
Aniruddha Pandit and listen to his experience. Can you unmute?
Let us go to the basic question of trying to understand the objectives of higher education institutes. So I'll talk briefly about that. Then I will try to categorize the higher education institutes, and then I will briefly talk about the success stories as pointed out by Professor Abhay Karandikar of IIT Kanpur. Will talk about ICT. Now, the objective of higher education institute essentially is to generate, store, or create a repository of a new knowledge and then disseminate it at an appropriate time. Now, this appropriate time is an extremely crucial aspect, and we will see about that in due course of time. Since we are talking about innovation and invention, or innovation and entrepreneurship spirit, it is necessary for us also to understand what do we mean by these two specific terms. We need to be able to differentiate between invention and innovation. Now, innovation is usually an add-on, i.e. the solution of existing or identified problem. And to convert it into entrepreneurship activity, you have many other constraints. And I think, as pointed out by Professor Karandikar as well, if time permits, we can discuss about that. Whereas the invention is concerned, invention is usually ready for entrepreneurship activity, looking at essentially unidentified or partially identified problem, and as a result of which it is much easier to convert it into entrepreneurship activity. I'm not saying that entrepreneurship activity actually per se is easier, but at least in terms of market potential, it is significantly better in case of invention. So higher education institutes can be broadly categorized in terms of technical or technological institutes such as IITs, ICERs, Indian Institute of Science, ICTs, NITs, as well as DRDO, ISRO, EARC, so on and so forth, which essentially work in the area of focused requirement. Second type of higher education institutes are social or humanity-based institutes such as Tata Institute of Social Science, TERI, and others. And the third part is those institutes which work at the interface or a borderline of the above two institutes, where they are in a position to establish a link between the two, and mostly these are management institutes. Traditionally, all these above mentioned higher education institute have focused on their core areas of expertise, and essentially worked in silos. If you look at the histories of IITs, after inception, it took them quite a few, at least 2-3 decades before they could think in terms of establishing management institutes. And as correctly pointed out by Professor Karandikar, as well as Dr. Radhakrishnan, that the need of the hour is now, and that's why it is resulting into this. So to convert technological innovations into entrepreneurship activity, you require a significant quantum of crosstalk between these three institutes, institutes of technology, institutes having a social angle, and institutes which understand and elaborate the management skills to convert this particular technology or a process or a product into a market. And social innovation needs to be spread to educate the masses. And this is where crucial importance is the timing, because many a times we introduce a technology which can be detrimental, such as making this information available through internet. And you see how the young generation is spending a whiling away time in terms of surfing the internet. I'm not saying that it is not totally useful, but majority of if you see the percentage of time spent by them, you will realize that we are not yet ready because the responsibility is not first understood. So let me now focus for a few minutes on ICT's initiatives. ICT is an 89-year-old. And in spite of no such focus in the past on efforts of innovations and entrepreneurship, ICT has been able to produce a significantly large entrepreneurs, and that too first generation entrepreneurs. You name the area in the chemical and sciences and chemical technology, and you'll find that ICT alumni is involved in that. More than 600 big players and many more medium or small size scale. The formalizing this happened only about 15 to 20 years ago. The need was felt only 15 to 20 years ago, where ICT started a chemical technology management course only as a certificate course to start with. And then it started into a diploma course, which was available for ICT's PhD students, where they could learn the management techniques and converting the translational research part, which Professor Karandikar talked about, is how the problem on which they are working during their PhD or masters can be converted into a possible entrepreneurship activity. Subsequent to that, these innovations and inventions, to convert them into product and processes, as also been mentioned earlier, you require a significant quantum of association and involvement of alumni. This resulted into shifting the focus from publications and thesis to development of products and processes. This has also been met with a considerable success, and the point to make here that this need was felt only after 60 years of the starting of the institutions. Now, this is most important because the success will only happen when there is time available and ready for the implementation of the new idea. As I said earlier, alumni involvement is absolutely crucial. to create an opportunity for UGs and PGs, we have also started Tinkering Lab, which allows the exploratory and experiential learning, and ICT NICE, Nurturing Innovation and Catalyzing Entrepreneurship Center, essentially in the form of a society. We did not go for Section 8 company, but essentially the objective of both is the same. And this was only started in last year, and it is in line with the NEP 2020, as you can understand. So NICE is essentially an incubation center connecting innovators with all the types of expertise which already exist in ICT. Now, this expertise essentially comes from our alumni, who are the mentors who will act for these incubators, provide the funding, as pointed out. It will provide the market analysis. It will provide the methodologies which are to be adopted. It will allow the efforts to be in the focused way so that the idea essentially gets converted into a product or a process. As you can see from above, the alumni involvement is critical, and nobody can question that. So once you identify the alumni which has got a much wider experience, they would be in a position to suggest the societal needs. They will be in a position to suggest the industrial needs. They would be in a position to suggest you the methodologies to be adopted so that the entrepreneurship activity finally is successful in terms of financial sustainability as well as technological sustainability. Government's initiative in terms of CSR spending has been of extremely useful activity for expanding it further or extending it further. I'll stop at this point and
thank you very much. Now we will go to Mr. Rahul.
Thank you so much.
About the international situation, because you are familiar with it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Radhakrishnan. Greetings to you all. It's a great privilege to be in this panel. Why would a corporation, any corporation, wish to invest in innovation at a higher educational institute? Now, many corporations already approach HEIs to try and solve problems that come up in the course of their operations. But that's something that can be done through consultancy. It doesn't require investment. Why do companies across the world invest in innovation at HEIs? I would suggest they do it for three simple reasons. They do it to be part of the future, to make sure that they are not outflanked by the technologies and the technology trends that might end up disrupting their business environments and that may leave them irrelevant in the future. Second, they do it with an eye on the bottom line. These are corporations that maximize shareholder value. So commercial opportunity, revenue funnels are important, and they act as a counterbalance to this focus in the future. The third reason why, while this might be necessary, a set of conditions for corporations to invest in HEI innovation, what drives sufficiency in that is de-risking. A corporation needs to be able to trust that its money is going into the safest hands possible from a commercial and technology standpoint. And these three factors, which appear to be a little contradictory, a little bit in tension with each other, this is the decision-making environment in which corporations operate. Now, India, needless to say, has some real centers of excellence in its R&D base. We have over 8,700 Atal Tinkering Labs, and that's very important. But maybe there are 3 or 4 lessons we can learn from global practice to try and help our institutions throw their darts into the middle of this triangle of factors that we've just outlined. For each of these, I'm going to quote a single example rather than a trend, simply for the sake of compulsion. I hope the examples will be compelling. The first thing that we can do exists within institutions. It's within the power and the gift and the leverage of individual institutions and institutional networks. It doesn't require the government quite so intensely at this stage. And that is to find ways of creating better funding environments for corporations to back technology. and innovation. And one of the most compelling examples, and perhaps one of the most famous examples, of course, is MIT's Media Lab, which has produced greats like Marvin Minsky, Negroponte, which works in viral communication technologies today, path-breaking work. Their model is very interesting, their institutional model. It involves corporate membership. And for that corporate membership to sponsor not a project here or a project there, but instead to sponsor entire areas of endeavor. So for example, when I say entire areas of endeavor, MIT's Media Lab, for example, will work on viral communications, which I just mentioned, scalable technologies that evolve with creativity, with users' creativity. Or they look at affective computing, which tries to get computing to respond to emotion. Or they look at molecular machines, and this, of course, we're all familiar with. Now, what that does is it creates 2 or 3 advantages. One, it allows corporations themselves to offer broadly interdisciplinary environments in which technology innovation can take place, and environments that are shaped by commercial thought, commercial trend lines, user-based and consumer-based imperatives, but also to have state-of-the-art innovation that advances the labs and the institute's agenda and that reflects the institute's own strength in creativity, in technology, in research, in being unblinkered by the quarterly profit targets and revenue targets that corporations have. So Professor Pandit, for example, mentioned very importantly, as a Professor Karandikar, the importance of having alumni to try and create some of those pain points, to try and inform how research works. This offers an institutionalized mechanism by which to do it. Now, once we've established this, and the MIT's Media Lab have $75 million in funding so far, almost predominantly from giant corporations, that allows us to balance that first urge of creativity and the second imperative of commercialization. But what do we do about risk? What do we do about helping our institutes become or gain trust from those organizations, from those corporations who might invest in HEI? Over here, I'd like to offer another example of Cambridge University, anchor of the Silicon Fen, one of the greatest R&D institutes and indeed technology centers in Europe. What Cambridge does is to find ways of creating a cohort of students at the undergrad and postgraduate level who are capable enough, familiar enough with how technology commercialization takes place, that it is possible for them to earn respect, trust, credibility, and lower risk perceptions when they're engaging with corporations. And they do this in very simple ways. I've actually been involved with these personally. One, they have in their 3rd and final year project, they connect their students in sciences and engineering, not just with external commercial partners, but with external commercial partners and world-class R&D labs. So a final year student in, let's say, natural sciences, in the natural sciences, Tripos, for example, will work on nanomaterials and nanotube research and will work with a corporation while they get constant training on a regular basis from institutes on how to manage technology, how to build a commercial case, and how to integrate all of these different pieces. Now, this sounds very simple, but it leads to a transformational difference. It means that the cohort of undergraduate and graduate students, when they first begin to engage with corporations to say, here's my research line, why don't you invest in it, and in the companies that will emerge, and in the center that houses it, they already understand commercial imperatives. It's been baked into their DNA right from the very beginning. The second thing that they do quite brilliantly is a program called iTeams, which I have to admit, it was stolen from the Americans, the original idea, which has mixes of students. So MBA students will sit with engineering students, will sit with physics students, will sit with material science PhD scholars, and together they will work on an integrated problem that comes from a corporation managed from the technology management schools and from the business schools. This is doable in India. The IITs, for example, have excellent engineering faculties and MBA faculties and pure science faculties. It's also doable in India, particularly at centers of excellence. So I have personally visited academic institutes connected, for example, to our space program, which visionaries like Dr. Radhakrishnan did so much to try and build up. We have a world-class cohort of students there at every tier and facilities, and we can bring these together. The third thing we could do, and I'm mindful of time, I want to make sure we don't violate our time limits here. And this is where government comes in. Professor Karandikar and Professor Pandit have made two very important points repeatedly, and I cannot agree enough with their wisdom in this, which is that we need to find ways of being able to break across boundaries. We need to break silos and connect different kinds of practices and thinking together. Now, we need to be a little careful about how heavily government intervenes. It's not always, the appropriate thing. But over here, government can play a very powerful convening role in bringing together corporations and researchers, companies and scientists to work together to elevate technology from readiness levels 3 to 4, 2 to 3, to about 6 to 7, where you have investment-ready prototypes, and to build the internal capacity within institutions that can create this. And again, to give you my third example for this afternoon, I would suggest the US STTR program, a cousin of the US SBIR program, Small Technology Transfer Program. What US STR does is to offer solicitation-based grants with some IP conditions around national security and so on, which is offered against a particular pain point. So there's a clear solicitation saying we'd like a solution to do X, Y, and Z. But that funding is offered explicitly and only to consortia. There needs to be an academic center and a company working together, making the proposal together. What that does is to use, with very small amounts of money, about $500,000, $1 million, which in American terms is not much, we can work out PPP here. What it does is to use government's power of financing to activate government's most powerful, most underused power in innovation, which is the power to convene. It gets researchers and technologists and entrepreneurs to work together, fostering this culture. I will stop with these comments. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for the interesting 3 points and the examples. Can I request Sri Rajendra?
Thank you, sir. Very engrossing and very, very interesting points emerging out of the discussion. And in fact, it is a privilege to be part of such a distinguished panel. Well, today I'm here more to take the best practices in academia from your side, and of course, to share more of government's view and how the government is trying to strengthen, create, and further take forward this innovation ecosystem. So to start with the whole startups idea and how IPRs, they interact with them and how they become very relevant for them. It is any a new entity which is coming, tries to always create a brand to, protect that brand, and where the first IPR, that is, trademark, comes into play. Similarly, for those creative, contents where not that much of scientific but artistic startups, what matters more important becomes is the copyright related aspects, and they need to be also made aware about their rights when it comes to the paintings, and about the books, about the literature, about the softwares, about their applications. Similarly, when it comes to the scientific innovations of processes, of products, then it is the patents which becomes the important instrument of IPR protection. And similarly, the awareness about industrial design is quite low. Many times people think IPR to be equivalent with the patent alone, and many times their innovation is also having something additional in terms of innovative design, which is not sometimes protected, and we our startups or our innovators, they are not conscious about what is that is protectable under this. So these all become very important. Similarly, even there is a separate law for semiconductors, circuit layout designs. This is something area where also which needs focus of the researchers. So further, the startups also need to confirm that they are also not violating any other person or other entities IPR rights in order to avoid themselves from future legal problems. So from that perspective also, IPR angle becomes very important. IPR education becomes very important for the startups. And IPR not only protect against any sort of infringement against other, but also this can also yield other benefits, as potential benefits when it comes to startups or MSMEs in terms of the economic gains or the economic significance of the IPRs. There's a study by European Patent Office and European Union for Intellectual Property Office, EU IPO, which suggests that there is a very positive and direct uh, positive correlation between IPR ownership and economic performance, with revenue per employee is 55% higher for IPR owners than for the non-owners. And furthermore, the analysis shows that the relationship is even more pronounced for SMEs. Those that own IPRs have a 68% higher revenue per employee than those that do not own the IPR. So there's a direct, from a very utilitarian point of view, of also from a very economic, logic. It makes a very important point that the IPRs of uh, the startups, they must learn to protect their IPRs, and this is not only they can leverage that in terms of higher economic gains, and also I think we are waiting for our financial institutions also to see where people can use IPRs as a instrument or a security for making or generating funds from the financial institutions. So in this context, I'll also like to make a point that in the recent years, the government has taken a very important cognizance of the fact, though in the innovation has rightly pointed out that it is not the attribute of the government to directly, this thing, but in the innovation ecosystem, definitely government has a very, very important and significant role to play. And a scheme which has been a game changer, uh, we cannot say that the game has changed, but I think we have taken a right direction. And when we look at the figures, I think we will be, there are things to be happy and things not to be happy about when we see the international scenario. The scheme for facilitating startups intellectual property protection, SIPP, one scheme that we brought out, has shown a significant improvement in filing of the IPRs. This encourages and facilitates IPR protection by startups which is implemented by my office, Controller General's office, and provides facilitators to startups for filing and processing of their applications for patent, designs, trademarks. And as on date, there are more than 900 such facilitators who are registered with Office of CGPTTM. The startups can take assistance from these qualified facilitators for filing and prosecution of their processing of their IPRs, and they are not required to pay any facilitation fee. And second thing, there are 80% reduction or concession in the fee for startups as compared to the big companies at patent. And third, there is expedited patent examination provision for the startups. And resultantly, the patent filing by startups increased from 220, which was there in 2016-17, to about 1800, 1800 in 2021. And more impactful results are seen in trademarks, where the application has increased from 4 in 2016-17 to about 6,500 in 2021. So we are able to see clearly the results. And one of the representation which was constantly coming up from the higher educational institutions was that this fee concession, which was extended to the government funded institutions, should also be extended to the private institutions, and government has done that. And we are hoping to see the results in terms of filing, because right now if we analyze the data on IPR filing, it is actually 12 to 15% of the institution that are accounting for the majority of the patent filing in the country. That means the majority of our higher educational institutions are still not geared up towards filing of the patent applications or IPR applications for that matter. If we see global data, I mean, China in a year, to 2020, had nearly 15 lakh applications for patents were filed by China. This number is nearly 6 lakhs for USA. And India, after SIP and these efforts, from 45, we have reached somewhere 58, 60,000. We are touching that. So we are, though in the top 6 to 9 of the countries in the terms of filing, but still, if we see, if we have to see that transformational change in the IPR, then we are still far away from our other countries. And we have always seen that there is this whole economic prosperity is always, there is a, before that transformation in terms of economic growth, there is always precedence in terms of the creation of the intellectual property rights in that country. And this and therefore, if we have that ambition of a mega transformation into the wealth creators into our country, we have to, in a major way, focus on the IPRs. And we have to see that how this harmonious relation that can exist between the startup ecosystem, academic institution, and the government institution, how we can work in harmony to see the larger goal. And I feel that the problem is more complex than actually it looks at surface. It is not all about giving targets to the institutions, and they will fine morning start doing innovation, and they will start filing more and more patents. Chairman sir, I feel that a problem is somewhere much deeper into our school education system itself. A system of education that where that creativity element is somewhere left behind. And in the rat race, you'll find and appreciate and empathize as a parent of a teenage daughter who has just seen a couple of years cracking my head with the my children, encouraging that you write differently, but they will not, my all arguments will fall flat, telling that no, this is not allowed by the teacher. Our education system inherently discourages divergence in thinking. A creativity cannot come out of a convergent thinking. The creativity is harnessed and that is nurtured on the breeding ground of divergence. The creators are psychodynamically very different and complex people. That complexity has to be nurtured, and often, more than often, our classroom, which is addressed to the mediocres, fails to make a distinction between this end of the bell-shaped curve and that end of the bell-shaped curve. It fails to make a distinction that the child intrinsically is creative and he's asking difficult question, and that mind which is seeking answer is suppressed in a school where sometime predominantly our teachers suggest the discipline and to see that, maintain decorum. That
Thank you. Thank you very much. In fact,
Thank you,
NEP 2020 envisages the school education to have more of critical thinking process
sir.
built
So
into
that's
that.
a very good thing, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you very
And,
much. And with that,
okay,
I will
if you,
just conclude. I think
yeah,
I'll just
if you look at
transfer
all
this
the
into the school
four
education.
panelists,
Thank you, sir.
one is ecosystem to facilitate innovation, that is creation and creation of IPRs. And then also there is a question of utilization of the IPRs. I just want to say 2 points. If you look at the higher education institutions of the 3 categories that Professor Pandit mentioned, we can say maybe 100 to 150 are there who can be counted for innovation. Can we think of networking or the consortium approach among these institutions so that they not only get into the intra silos they break, the institutional synergy we bring in, and maybe we can have a dozen of such networks in the country established over the year. That is number one. Number two, if you look at the leading technology institutes in the country and you look at the utilization of the patents, it may be 5 to 10% of what they have been sanctioned. That shows the creation of those intellectual properties are not really where it should be. It is not need-based. It is based on his own or her own inquisitiveness, actually. So we need to bridge this gap between the need and what we can provide. This is another aspect of it, which we should be able to look at it. With this, I would say that we need to be aware that in the world, if we have to go for economic growth, the IPR is an essential element. Number two, we need to have interdisciplinary culture and also institutional synergy to get into this. We talk about disruptive technologies, etc., etc. And if you look at today, there is big science and deep technology which are getting into solution of societal problems, and that is where we should have innovations focused. And this is a great challenge for the academic institutions, especially those who have the ability with the great people, great minds, and the infrastructure and mechanisms to do it. Thank you very much for ICT to give us this opportunity for all of us. And I'm sure that this is not the end of the process and the dialogue would continue. Thank you very much.
Dr. Abhay, you want to say something? Please go ahead.
First, I would really like to thank DPIIT and Ratu sir for personally championing the case of reducing fees for IP filing. He has aggressively championed within the ministry, and that is the reason the IP filing fees has gone down by more than 80% or so. So it's more or less in par with the individual filing. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank him. And also I was listening to the discussion quite seriously, and the point which Radhakrishnan sir made about creating a consortia of institutions, and actually we are thinking on those lines, sir, and we are coming up with a mentor-mentee kind of a program where, sir, the institutes like ICT will actually handhold and support the institutions where this innovation ecosystem is certainly not there, sir. So yes, it's a very, very important issue which you have raised, sir, and I will aggressively champion it within the ministry, sir. So these were very important points and takeaways for me from this discussion.
Thank you.
So just with your kind permission, just one last point, a few seconds, sir.
Yeah, please.
We'll just like to tell that we have taken our organization by 75 people have volunteered to come forward to build capacity of higher educational institutions on the IP awareness. As we have seen that only 10 to 15% educational institutions are aware, and we have taken a target of 1 million, reaching out to at least 1 million students We request cooperation from the other higher educational institutions, ICT, and as well as other prominent people who are here. So we request them to partner with this journey with us, and this collectively, this can be a very good initiative of collaboration. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ratnu sir, I have a small doubt in this. When we are saying we are extending the benefit for IP filing fee to educational institutes, private as well as government, whether schools are also eligible for it, sir?
Yes, educational institution that does not make distinguish between.
Yeah. Okay, sir. I got the answer. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can I just
Thank
make
you.
one point here? Is I think AICT should take up a lead and break the silos in terms of cross-disciplinary academic appointments. If a background with one degree is not allowed to enter into another degree, especially in academic institutes, that is a major bottleneck as far as cross-fertilization of ideas are concerned. So that needs to be taken up very seriously. And for us to be able to actually do interdisciplinary research, this is a major initiative which AICT can take.
I agree with you, sir. So we had more than 500 people, 600 people actually live listening to this very exciting discussion. On behalf of AICT and MOE's Innovation Cell, I would really like to thank Radhakrishnan sir, Abhay Karandikar sir, Ratnuje, Rahul, Pandit sir for sparing your time and guiding us and sharing a very valuable wisdom with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.